Alright, I'm making this video for Tommy because he asked me, as if I'm not busy enough. But okay. So I'm gonna discuss how to screen print inserts. And what we're looking at here is Photoshop. And before I get into Illustrator, we start with Photoshop, and I'm just gonna kind of shoot this from the hip with my phone. Hopefully it's not too terribly shaky. So what I'm gonna do is the scans of the center Playfield, this is Grand Prix. These are the Playfield scans that I took. So I'm going to take the scans of the center of the Playfield, which this is going to be a little bit more difficult. Hold on a second, I can hit the shift button. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take all the scans of the center of the Playfield. This is going to be a little more difficult because it is a two-color insert. And as it opens, you'll see what I'm talking about. So as you can see there, it's black and red. So what I'm going to do is I took all these scans in different areas, and then I've got to tell the system to stitch these together, right? So we're going to go to our file, and then we're going to come down to automate, and then we're going to go over, hopefully, and go to photo merge. So it's going to bring up a new box, and I'm going to tell it that I want to add all of the open files. So it's going to have all those, and I'm going to say okay, and now it's going to start doing its thing. You'll see it working over here. It's adding all the photos. Boom. And now it starts thinking. And now it starts working. Boom. So now I have the entire thing. And I also, if you'll notice, I kept this so I can also draw the key lines around the large inserts that we made out of acrylic. And then I'm going to separate these layers. I'm going to do a black layer and a red layer because we'll have to actually screen print this with two different screens. And I'm going to use the same screen that I create. I'm just going to use two different sections, and we'll tape the other section off. So we'll lay down our red first on the new inserts, and then we'll come back behind that and do our black. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll save this. I'm going to rotate it first. Let's do that. Image rotation, 180 degrees. Hey, that looks much better. Okay. So I'm going to save this, and then I'll import it into Illustrator, and I will draw the two layers. I'm not going to show video of that because, you know, Illustrator is just a whole different animal. I'll show the end result of the two layers that I draw when I've got those done. So stay tuned. I am going to show just a little bit of the setup for Illustrator. I'm doing a 17-inch width by 11-inch height document setup, and the reason I'm doing that is I have like one of the medium format printers, so the screen, this right here, will just about fill one of the silk screens that I'm going to use. So I try to maximize and do as much as I can with one screen because the chemicals aren't cheap. When you have to, you know, coat a screen and do all that. Plus, it's less work if you only have to create one screen. So we're going to set up the document as a 17 by 11. And the first thing we do is import. Actually, it's not an import. We're going to place. So we're going to place. And we're going to add. I have two different ones. Upper Playfield. There's a couple of inserts at the top that have to just a real simple Winlet single color. So I'm going to place this, and I'm going to place it, boom, just like that. And what we'll do is we're going to make this layer a template, and it's going to gray it out. So once we gray it out, then I will create a new layer over the top of that. And this is the layer that I'll be drawing on. So I'm going to go ahead and draw all of my different artwork, and then I'll show you that when I'm done. Okay, we've got our layers drawn in, and I'm going to show you in the order that we're going to put the layers down with the ink onto the inserts. So we'll start with the reds. The reds will go on the bottom, and we're going to do what's known as a bleed line. And the reason we do that is because if you try to cut this line exactly with the red between the black, if I make the red actually that size, then what's going to happen is I'll never line it up perfectly, so you'll get this little gap. You'll get a little gap between these two. I realize you can't see that, so I'm kind of getting closer here. So we have basically two layers. This is our red layer, this is our black layer. So I'm going to turn the red layer on first, and you'll notice it's going to bleed beyond where the 4 is. So as you can see, that's bigger than the red. However, we'll go behind the red, or over the top of the red, we'll put our second layer down, which is our black. So once we put our black down, you see how that tightens that up. And also on the black layer, we have our surround for the 2 large arrows at the bottom. So when I create the screen, I'm going to actually create, I'll burn the screen in one spot with this red, and then I'll burn the second screen with the black, and then once we lay the black over the top of the red, it should look good. So that's the whole Illustrator part of it. Not much really to it. It took me about, I don't know, about 30 minutes to draw all that. So I'll show you the next part where we will make the screens and all that coming up. Okay, I'm just going to briefly touch on this topic. This is one of the silk screens that I'll use to silk screen the new graphics, and you'll notice this 110 at the top. Different screens you can buy have different resolutions. The higher the number, the more tightly the screen is. When it's made, it uses a tighter screen, which means it has a higher thread count, basically. I usually use between 110 and 160. That provides enough resolution, but you can still get the ink through it. The tighter the screen, the harder it is to get the ink through it. So just kind of touching on that. So I use, in this case, I'm going to use a 110 resolution screen. And this is the kind of emulsion that I use. And I'm going to coat the screen with this emulsion, and it's light sensitive, so I'll have to do it under in a light safe environment. And I use this because I like this particular. This is the CBX 7500 from Color Matrix out of Atlanta. I like this particular emulsion because it goes on nice and thin, so I can still see through it. Even on the areas that are going to remain blocked and won't let the ink go through. But in some of the thicker stuff, because you don't have the luxury of like a test shirt to line all your stuff up, this is going to be a this will be a 2-color print. So anyway, this is the only emulsion that I use. I really like it. So we'll go ahead and coat the screen. After we coat the screen, then it has to go into, I have a light safe box. It has to go in there and dry. And then after that, we'll use, you see these are the transparencies, and I'll make a transparency for the graphics for this particular machine Grand Prix. I'll do one for the red, one for the black, like we showed on the computer screen. You'll see it. We'll expose the screen on an exposure unit for about 45 seconds, then we'll wash it out. Then I'll have my screens made. So once you got that part done, the rest is pretty easy. All right, I'm not sure how perfectly this is lined up, but hopefully that's going to be good. All right, and a lot of times, if I'm going to coat a screen, I'm going to coat 2 screens. You want to allow yourself, in case you make a mistake on one, the second screen is going to be a 160 count. So, and I don't have a whole lot of this left. I should have enough to do 2 screens though. So this is our scoop. So we're going to put this emulsion into the scoop coater. You want to be careful about how much you agitate this emulsion before you pour it, because you'll get bubbles in it, and that causes you'll get a little dot in the screen that ink can get through. Now, not such a big deal on a hard surface like a pinball machine, because you can just wipe it off before it dries. But if you're doing a t-shirt, that's different. Once it goes on a t-shirt, it's hard to get off. We should have enough there to coat a couple of screens. I know we can get one out of it. I've got a little bit left in there. Okay, this scoop coater has a thick edge and a thin edge. I'm going to use the thin edge on the screen. You want to coat the back side of the screen first. So we're going to give it a little lean here. I'm going to take this, put it up against the screen. Wait for it to all run up and touch the screen. I'm going to let that run back down into the scoop coater. Now I'm going to kind of take the excess off. Got one side of the screen coated there. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now I'm waiting for the emulsion to actually all run up against the screen before I actually start moving it. Same thing. Excess off. We should have a good screen there. So I'm just checking the screen for consistency to make sure there's not like a real thick band through it. Sometimes you'll get that, so I'd go over it again and take the excess off. This should be a good screen. I'm gonna do one more. First. Make sure I let all that run back. Don't want to make that same mistake again. Notice I'm leaning the screen a little bit this way, so that way I get good contact with the emulsion. So I'm leaning it way over, waiting for it to get on the screen. And I know what some of you are saying, man, that's a lot of work for some ink on a couple of inserts. And you're absolutely right. It is a lot of work. However, I think pinball deserves it. So, you know, I think we all take this hobby to different levels, right? I mean, my level is not, say, Pinball Pimp's level. I don't think anybody's level is Pinball Pimp's level. He really does some incredible work. And at the same time, you'll go some places, you know, where they don't take care of their machines at all. And I think that if you're going to be an operator, you know, you need to have machines that play well, especially if you're going to do tournaments, right? Because I think you can really hurt this hobby if a bunch of operators start putting out machines and they don't maintain them, and then people come and play them, especially first-time players. You know, they're like, pinball sucks because the machines never work right. So if you're an operator, stay on top of your shit, right? Keep your stuff working well. So I'm just going to clean this out. Put the rest back down in to save it, because this stuff is not exactly cheap. It's not like it's gold, but it's, you know, it all adds up. And we're going to let this dry for probably 6 or 7 hours, and then tonight I'll have my transparency done. We'll print that out, and we will expose the screen, and we will be ready to lay some ink down after that screen is made. And I actually have to go downstairs while this is drying and finish putting all the new inserts into Grand Prix. So, see you guys shortly. Okay, we've got our transparency done, and the inserts are all complete. So I put red inserts in up here at the top, and then I went with the simple white down here at the bottom. Just kind of kept it original. They didn't have any amber flat like these. These are the flat red that are see-through. Now I've sanded them so they're right now they're a little, you know, a little more opaque than they will be once we clear coat it. It'll be fine. And I also went with the original red opaque down here at the bottom. And the only ambers I could find were also the Starburst jeweled, whatever you want to call it. So back to the screen printing thing. So if you'll notice, there are 3 different areas here. This will be the red. This will be the black over the red for these, and then the 2 windlets at the top. So what we'll do, get this out of the way, is we're going to make sure that they line up properly. So we'll take that. So like that. So that's going to look fine. That's going to line up okay. Same way down here, we'll do our red layer first. So the red layer will go down something similar to this, and then we'll let that dry, and then we'll move the screen over, and we will screen the black just like that over the top of the red. Now this is kind of tough because it's a one-shot deal. You don't have any way to register this like you would a t-shirt, but we'll make it work somehow. Also, you'll notice that I did the surrounds for these. These turned out really well. These are those, I couldn't find any new inserts, the big triangles. So I created these out of a large sheet of the clear red acrylic. Once again, these have also been sanded smooth. So they're going to be they're a little opaque. They'll be a little clearer on the top side after we lay down our clear coat. All right. So that's kind of where we are right now. I'm waiting for the sun to go down so I can burn the screen or expose the screen, and then I'll bring it out here and wash it out and kind of show you how to do that. Then we'll dry it and we'll be laying down ink next. While I'm waiting for those screens to dry, gotta have something to do, right? Ooh, well. And that's screened, although it's washing out on this camera, but that's all screened. Once again, kind of washing out a little bit. I didn't have to screen any of these. These were already, obviously not that one. But I didn't have to screen anything on that one when I restored it either. Yeah, this is a small part of my collection. And I've got some in there as well. And these are all going to be, these will all be leaving when we open the pub. So, but I have to, you know, play them and make sure they're working right. So. All right, we're back in our light safe environment. We've got our transparency, and this is our exposure unit. So we'll use that to expose the screen. This looks like it dried nicely. It's looks pretty even. So what we'll do is we'll put this, actually, it goes, put it in the center of the screen, like that. Get this piece of tape, secure it. So we want to expose this for 1 minute. So that where it needs to be. Okay. We have to make sure that we have good contact between the screen and the transparency and the exposure unit. If not, then you'd get a blurry image that got burned into the onto the screen. So I'm going to start it. I'm going to run it for 1 minute. So, all right. So now we have what's known as a latent image that is burned onto this screen. So what we have to do is take it downstairs to our washout station, and we'll wash it out. I'm going to put it in a garbage bag because we're going to be traveling through regular light, which would cause the screen to expose further. And what you could end up with is it would basically lock the whole screen, it would lock the areas that we want to wash away. So let's go downstairs. Wash the screen out. So you'll notice you can immediately start to see that image. So we've got it wet, we're going to let it sit for a minute. And here in just a second, we'll go ahead and wash it the rest of the way out. We're going to do kind of a quality check on it and make sure all of our emulsion came out. Hold it up to some light. That looks good. We got nice clean lines. Same here. So there's our black layer. There's our red layer. And then there's our upper area layer for black. So now I'm going to put this in front of a fan so we can dry it out. And then once I have it dried out, we'll lay down some ink. And we have our screen set. So we're going to do the top part first. And as you can see, this is where I talked about how nice and thin this emulsion is, so I can see through it. I can push down and see that I'm lined up exactly where I want to be. Here and here. We've got our ink. We're going to be using Speedball acrylic ink. So what I'll do is put this on the tripod, and this is our this is the squeegee that we'll use to push the ink through the screen. So I'm going to set this on the tripod, and then I'll put down some ink and we'll start screen printing. So the first thing we want to do is flood our screen, and what I mean by flood it, we're going to pull ink into the screen, and it'll kind of suspend in that webbing. You can kind of see how it's stuck in there, all right? And then we're going to take and squeegee it through. I'm going to press down hard. Now that ink is gone out of the screen, okay? We'll kind of let that sit for a second. We're going to do several coats. I'm going to flood the screen again. put down a second coat. I'm going to flood the screen one more time. We'll put down a third coat. Now I could maybe put down a fourth coat. You have to be careful because once you put down so many coats, you'll have so much ink it'll start spreading out. But you want to try to get it as thick as you can, so you're not dealing with light issues coming through. It's hard to get this ink thick enough to where you don't get some light transmission through the ink. Let's see what we got. I'm going to try to get some of this ink. I'm going to get the spare ink up off the screen. Put it back. Try to save as much of the leftover material as you can. And of course, I can reclaim this screen. I will be able to remove this emulsion and we'll have a fresh screen again. And also, I didn't mention this, you'll notice I've got my screen locked down. What you definitely don't want it to move. So once you get it in place, you'll lock it down. So you don't get any motion out of it. And we'll take a look and see what we got. Here, this is what the final looks like. Of course, it's still wet. That's our final screen print. Put a little light up through it to see how much light transmission we get. So that's doing a pretty good job of blocking it. And that's what we want. So that turned out to be a good screen print. Of course, next up is the harder one. That's going to be the black over red. And I'll go ahead and get everything set up for that. We've got our red layer locked down. So I'll put the red in here, and then we'll move it over, follow it up with the black. I kind of put the black over and looked where it was in relation to these lines to try to line it up. Because we've got some bleed, if it's not perfect, it's okay. Even if it bleeds out a little bit, it's okay. Because actually, if you'll go back and look at original screen printing, it was pretty common for colors to bleed outside of each other, especially on these older machines. As a matter of fact, this you can see was not lined up perfect. Most of the ink ended up below the insert. So we try to not do that. You know, we want to make it better. But at the same time, if I move the circle up too far, it'll be a little out of whack at the bottom. So. Playing with this ink is a scary, scary proposition because I have dropped a big thing of this, bigger than this. And I didn't just drop it like out here on the concrete. I dropped it in the house on carpet. It was a fun day. It was a good day. All right, so we're gonna flood. Before I flood this, I'm a little nervous about it moving too far over here into this other screen. So what I'm gonna do, just give me some boundaries here. I would hate to end up with ink going through another spot where I don't want it. Because this ink tends to spread quite a bit once you start flooding the screen. So I'm going to grab a little less of this ink than I think I need. Okay, that did flood, I can tell by looking at it. So we're going to push, put our ink down. I'll flood it again. another little piece. We're going to flood it a third time. I can tell just by looking at it, another layer of ink wouldn't have hurt. So we're probably going to get a little more light transmission through this one. Of course, it is the red versus the black, but I think it'll be fine. We're going to let that dry, then we'll come back and do the black over the top of it. And finally, we've got our black layer lined up. And this is the black over red. You can see the red underneath. That's where we're going to cover it. We got the first layer lined up pretty good. This is getting a little high up into this red arrow, which is not a huge deal. But I'm going to try to block just a little bit of it. It may work, it may not. A little bit of this tip's going into the red arrow, which this was re-airbrushed anyway, so not a huge deal. But let's see how our let's see what we look like after we finish this final layer of ink. All right. Gonna flood. And oh, I didn't flood the very top of that. You have to watch. There it is. Okay. And we'll pull going down. We'll do that one more time. Flood it. Now, when I flood, I'm just barely pulling the squeegee across the screen. Now, when I want to put the ink on, because there's a little bit, this screen is not actually contacting the Playfield. It's what's called off contact. So it's just that much above, just kind of floating above. All right, we're gonna flood one last time. Final run. And I think we're going to call it a day. See what we come up with. Kind of hard for me to see it from this angle. Got a bunch of reflection. And that turned out okay. That's certainly, it's not perfect. But once again, you know, my screen printing skills rarely are. But we got stars, and we got the red inside the black. Of course, it's very shiny right now because it's really, really wet. Once it dries, you can see it looks much better. So, and we also got our surrounds around this. Now I'll have to touch this up with a little bit of just a paint pen, black paint pen. That shouldn't be too hard. And that piece of tape did block from hitting that spot. I decided to use that second screen to do all the small circles that are along the spinner lights. There's 10 spinner lights, and then there's 10 on each side of the bonus. So I've already done these three. I figured I would put this last one on film. It's really no different than the other, and it's a single color, so it's easier. So I've already got it set in place. I've got everything. These ones that I've already done, I've put tape on the underside of them. Same here. And I also use these to do like the special and the when the spinners are lit. so on and so forth. So I figure I'll go ahead and do this last one. I'm going to do 2 runs on this one. There is our final run. So we've got all of our circles done. Same for down here, up top. So it'll look better after I clear coat it. That'll clean everything up. But these are pretty much done. So anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed watching. I know I can ramble, but I don't do this professionally. You know, leave me some comments, thoughts, and or if you try it, you know, make a video. Show us how you did it if you do anything different. Thanks. Tommy, you owe me one, buddy.